Ghastly Gospels is in association with Blurred.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Ghastly Gospels, where every episode is a grave encounter. And today, we are talking about some of the legendary unsolved murders as well as the killers who performed said murders. So, honestly, I hope you guys are ready. Some of these are our favorite, some of these are not. Some of these are kind of low key. I think one actually is kind of low key unless you actually live in Louisiana, but the rest of these you all should definitely know. So again, I am Dr. Kaori Knight and I am here with Captain Diesel.
Hey y'all, howdy doody everybody. We're gonna be talking about killers today.
That is how you decide country and all. You are definitely from Georgia.
I look, relax, not too much, cause the pot is calling the kettle black as hell right now.
First of all, mine doesn't come out as often, but it sure did, and it doesn't sound like that either. Okay.
Just because you like to lie to yourself doesn't make you any better than me.
Whatever. Anyway, on our last episode, we talked about possessions and exorcisms, which if you tuned into that, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Getting the audio from an exorcism was absolutely fantastic. I even actually after we did that, and my boyfriend listened and he was like, "That's interesting." I was like, "It's really interesting because we're about to watch the Pope's Exorcist."
Wow, you just did that to him. You made him hear that and then watch that. That's crazy.
He said, "I think I need to like go baptize myself."
Jesus Christ.
um, how did you feel about that last episode?
I think that was our best episode yet. I was really excited about how well it went in regards to the smoothest factor. I think we tried it along pretty well. And I think the choices we chose were very interesting. I always love when we get to pick topics that are tangentially related to popular media, just because sometimes people don't know where it's based on, or sometimes people see the title, based on a true story and don't really understand how much of it was based on a true story and how much of it was
Mhm.
dramatized for the film or the series or whatever it may be. So I really enjoyed that one, and I think this one may be a better one. I'm not gonna lie, I think this one may be the best episode we do so far.
I know a lot of people also like because they wait until it's been revealed and they're like, "Oh my god, I was today years old when I found that out," and I'm like, Shit, I look up things as soon as it, as soon as we're done, I'm looking it up." So I mean, I understand when people are like, they go see the movie based on a true story and they're like, "I need to take a break." Not me,
Mm,
can't do it. I have to go look it up. I'm like, "What story is this?"
Jesus. I'm kind of the same way. I, to an extent, want to know. It depends on how fresh the murder is. I feel like if it's something that's like really recent, I kind of want to put it out of my head to kind of, I guess, give me the fake idea that things like this don't happen today. But I love seeing more historical crimes and murders just for the factor of I think there's a lot more. How do I put this? Because I don't want to say fun because fun doesn't make me sound like I'm insane. But there's not as
You
much
are.
like forensics that were around back then that there are today. Like I feel like today you could get a skin flake on the ground and they would be able to like track back to you and find your address within the day. Back then, you have people like we have in our stories today we're going to discuss that can get away with all these murders and all these horrendous things and never be found because of the lack of technology that was around back then.
Agreed, agreed, agreed. But well, since you brought up today, let's get into it. We have four killers. Well, we have three killers and a murder that we are going to talk about. So
Hmm.
you have one of my absolute favorites
Yeah,
with a movie that stars Robert Downey Jr.
really. Which movie is this?
Yes, Zodiac.
I didn't. Oh, I've never seen the movie actually. I need to watch that movie at some point.
Really? It's
Yeah, I
actually
did.
it's actually very, very good. And the one of the reasons that I even actually watched that movie is because Robert Downey Jr. is in it, but not only Robert Downey Jr. is Robert Downey Jr. Um, who else is it? The one that plays Bruce Banner. Who? Why can't I not?
Ruffalo?
Mark Ruffalo. Yes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mark Ruffalo and Jake Gyllenhaal.
Oh, that's a fire cast. I may have to wait. I gotta watch. I may watch that tonight. Actually,
Yeah, they also have, like, Brian Cox is in there from what I remember, John Carroll Lynch, I think is also in there. There's another one, I wanna say his name is, like, Anthony Edwards, I can't remember.
the NBA. No, I'm not gonna make the NBA player joke. Let me stop. Let me stop. Let me stop. That's too.
Shut up.
That's too corny. That's too corny.
I know, Dermot Mulroney, I think, is also in there, like, it's a really amazing cast, but the movie's great.
All right. So for people that haven't figured out by now, I am going to start this whole thing off by discussing to be what I think is the template for the serial killer and what people perceive a serial killer to be. Usually, this man has spawned tropes that are used in every movie you can think of, every TV series you can think of, and that is the Zodiac killer that was prolifically active during the 1960s. So, first and foremost, I want to start this off by kind of giving you guys the breakdown on his first murder. I'm only going to be talking about his first two murders here, because I think these were the beginnings of him kind of getting into his MO and how he proceeded to do other things down the line. Because I feel like as time goes on with the Zodiac killer murders, things get a little bit more difficult for the factor of it became this big pop thing, and because people never knew who the original guy was, I feel like there were a lot of people over time who claimed to be him, claimed to have family members that were him, claimed to have colleagues that were him, and it kind of felt like a cry for help because especially once you get to a certain point to where Zodiac killer things were so popular, people were calling into different police stations saying they were him. And again, I think a lot of people are just doing things for attention at a certain point. And because this person is anonymous, people can do that, and there's no, that you can have no fight back on who it was. So I doubt the
Mhm.
true Zodiac killer was able to do certain things based on that. But getting into the first two kills, specifically the first one here, I want to take you guys back to December 20th of 1968. See, there was a, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed guy by the name of David Faraday, and he was gonna have him a good night, have him a little date night with his girlfriend, or I guess potential girlfriend, Betty Lou Jensen. So they were on a date, supposed to go to this concert after meeting up with friends, and they decided to go do the stereotypical thing that every teenage couple does in a movie, and they go to this abandoned area off of Lake Herman Road to, do the hanky panky, as a lot of old school people would say here in the South. Um, but as they're on the road,
Mhm.
though, a man walks up on them and he draws his pistol and he proceeds to try to make them get out of their car. Obviously, them being pretty smart, they decide to say, "Hell no, I'm not going to get out of my car at a man drawn with a gun drawn on me. I'm going to stay in the car and potentially try to get away." He then, this mysterious killer, proceeds to shoot a couple shots at the back tire of the car as well as along the body of the car to try to incentivize them to get out of the car. This did the trick because David was able to jump. Yeah, at least he attempted to get out of the driver's side door, and he proceeded to get shot point blank in the head by this assailant one time. And Betty herself tried to get out of the car, and she made it a good bit away before she was shot 5 times in the back. So these two were tragically murdered on this night, and for a whole year there was no knowing on who committed this murder. These two bodies were just found, and people just assumed this was some kind of wild random kill. I think there were reports of people that were trying to scare teenagers this night out in the woods. There were hunters who were apprehended and thought to be the murderers, but the rifles that they had didn't match the bullet caliber that was found on the scene. So there was just a bunch of people that could have possibly been connected to this murder, but just were not. They didn't have enough evidence to convict those people of that murder. When you're moving into a year later, you have another murder that was taking place at the Blue Dot Springs golf course. And again, for people that aren't aware, both of these murders and all the murders that happened that were in relation to the Zodiac Killer were taking place in San Francisco, California. So this is where everything's going to be taking place. But for the second murder here, this gunman was said to be parked behind the couple in this parking lot, and this couple being Michael Magoo and Darlene Farron. Again, another horny couple. They were a little bit older. They were around 19 to 20 in that age range. So they were a little bit older. They were
Mhm.
grown to some extent. But they assumed that they were doing something illegal, being parked at this golf course and, doing stereotypical young person stuff. So they assumed that this person behind them was a police officer, and this person shined a flashlight in their faces to kind of make sure they couldn't see who he was, and he was having them get their IDs out. As they were in the process of doing this and kind of going through their stereotypical police procedural stuff, or at least police procedural stuff. The murderer then proceeded to walk to the driver's side window and he let off 5 shots into this vehicle, and seemingly killed both of them. As this killer was going back to his car, though, he heard that Michael was still breathing, kind of moaning in pain. So he proceeded to double back and put 2 more shots in both of the bodies of the kids that were there, and then he proceeded to drive off. Now, this was a little interesting because right after this, the police received a phone call from a random phone booth, and this phone call reported the crime and admitted to the first crime from a year prior. And this was said on the phone call: I wish to report a double murder. If one of you will go a mile east on the Columbus Parkway to the public park, you will find the kids in a brown car. They have been shot by a 9 millimeter Luger. I have also killed the kids last year. Goodbye. This is all that was said by the Zodiac killer at this moment in time. And obviously, people from the year prior, they kind of connected the two murders and they assumed this was connected to a certain extent. And the more interesting thing here that happened is that Michael was blessed enough to survive this encounter because people found the body relatively quickly after the gunshots were fired. So Michael was able to survive this
Mhm.
attack and he was able to give up a description of the Zodiac killer because obviously he didn't hold his flashlight up the entire time he was attempting to murder them. Michael then described the Zodiac killer as a white male adult who's around 5'8", weighing maybe around 170 to 200 pounds, looking as if he's in the age range of 35 to 45 years old, and he had a heavier, stocky build, and he walks with a limp. So we finally have some form of a depiction on what we think the Zodiac killer looked like. So from my perspective, think more of like a swoller version of um, the Jeffrey Dahmer character from the Jeffrey Dahmer series from Netflix. That's what I kind of imagine. Uh, Evan Peters kind of look, but a little stockier of a build, essentially.
Mhm.
Now, a month after the second attack, there were 3 identical letters that were sent to 3 different newspaper reporting I said newspaper reportings, since it's 3 different newspaper oh my gosh, I can't speak today, I'm sorry, y'all. There are 3 different identical letters sent to 3 different newspaper companies. These companies were the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Viejo Times Herald. These letters were identical, like I said before, and they detailed who was the person that committed these murders, essentially having the Zodiac killer kind of taking responsibility for these murders yet again. But the interesting thing that was attached to these as well was a form of a 408 symbol cryptogram, which for people that aren't aware is a essentially a big puzzle that is encrypted through text and has its own form of cipher, I guess, that you have to discover to find out what the letters meant or what the text meant that was written into this letter. He had a different set of 3 different parts of a cryptogram that was sent to 3 different newspaper articles, newspaper companies as well. And he was letting them know through another phone call that if they were able to decrypt the ciphers and find out what the cryptogram meant, then they would be able to discover what his name was. Now, interesting enough, not too long after these cryptograms were received, there were people that attempted to solve this thing because not only did he send the cryptograms to the newspaper companies, he requested that they take the cryptograms and the letters that he sent and they needed to be put on the front page of the newspapers there. I think at one point he threatened that if they did not put these letters on the front page of the newspaper, he would then go right around the area of San Francisco looking to just murder random people at random.
Mhm.
So funny enough, the police department, I'm assuming the police department was a partial in making sure that these newspapers didn't do that because they were not um, either were not able or they just refused to put these letters and this cryptogram on the front page, but they instead put it on the fourth page, which in my opinion, if you're gonna put it in there at all, you might as well just put it on the front page to try to stop potentially more murders from happening because you don't know how serious he is at this point. But
Mhm.
nevertheless, not too long after this guess couple, I guess you could call them, they were amateur cryptologists. They were just really interested and had a lot of knowledge on how to crack ciphers like this. And these were people by the name of Donald and Betty Harding. These were a couple that were living in the area at the time. And the way they cracked the cipher and the way this worked is that they had to guess phrases or letters or sentences that they thought would be a part of the cryptogram sequence in itself in regards to what the letter said. And there were 3 things that were guessed that they were pretty accurate on, and it was the letter I, because it was pretty much apparent that this person is very much so a narcissist to some extent and was craving attention. So they looked as for the words I, the word kill, and I believe the last word was or the last phrase was "I killed them," or I take essentially taking credit for the murders, and they were able to crack the cipher. Now cracking the cipher, it was pretty much nonsensical in regards to the things that were said there. People were still weren't really able to come up with like a clean, uh, I guess, depiction of what was said because obviously this person is not in the best frame of mind. But since then, there was a slew of other murders that happened in that time frame, kind of fitting the same MO, more cryptogram messages that were sent along. And the more interesting thing that I found out that was put at the end of all these letters was a logo. And this logo featured a circle with a cross sent through it. And in these letters, he was also finally detailing his name being Zodiac. So he gave himself his own name. He also is probably, I think, the only serial killer to give himself his own logo and own branding at this point in time. So it was very interesting. Like I said before, after that, I think you started to see a lot of copycats. You started to see a lot of people that were claiming to be the Zodiac for the attention and whatnot. So there's no way to 100% guarantee which of these murders were still the ones relate in relation to the original Zodiac killer. But again, to this day, there is never any person found or convicted of these murders. People just assume that this Zodiac killer is still out there prancing around living to this day. And I think that's the scarier thing is that he was never caught and he could potentially be living today still, depending on how old he is. Granted, I don't think he'd be much of a threat because he's probably incredibly old at this point. But it's very interesting that this individual was essentially the template for most other serial killers throughout American history, as well as serial killers throughout most forms of media, not just in America, but internationally as well. There's usually some form of messaging or some form of like coded text that I always see in these serial killer shows or movies. It's always like I think most recently the movie that I watched that's more so loosely is based on this is the movie Long Legs that came out last year that featured Nicolas
Mm,
Cage and oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the leading actress's name. I follow her on Instagram and I cannot remember her name right now. It'll come back to me later
it's because
probably,
you're
but
old.
mhm,
It's because you're old.
probably you're contagious. Um, but yeah, that's another film that featured again a serial killer that had some kind of coded sequence within the murders and whatnot. So this is something that is very much so. I say the godfather of serial killers in that regard. So that all being said, Kira, what are your thoughts on the Zodiac killer?
So it has always been one of my beliefs that the zodiac was two people.
How so?
It's always been because you have it's always been up until I watched
Screen?
A Crime to Remember.
Oh,
Shut up. Uh but either theory makes sense to me. So when we were talking like when you have two victims, I always was just like, how is it that you make one victim do what you need while having another victim who is technically free to like you have too many things going on or too many like uh miscalculations that can happen when you by yourself are handling two people, and there's always that room for error, there's that room for somebody to see you possibly get away, like the girl who she was able to get some ways away but she was shot 5 times in the back, like who's
mhm,
like what could have happened if you had a missed or if you didn't like double check she's actually still alive, she saw your face 100% and then like they get there in time and she's the one who gives away full face description, description of your car, extra, extra. Like, so I always felt like it was two people because when you're trying to handle couples, you definitely need an extra hand. However, after watching A Crime to Remember, I was like, this could definitely be one person because there was I think it's in season 5 and maybe season 4, one of the 2. There was a murder is early Los Angeles, and there was a guy who was going around, and he didn't kill anybody until, I don't think he killed anybody until later. Honestly, I don't think he killed anybody at all, but he was a serial rapist, and there was couples who were going on, like, Lover's Lane
Mhm,
to make out, and he was pretending to be a police officer, held the flashlight up in their eyes so they couldn't see, um, but could see just enough to show, like, his badge off, and then his bright lights were on his car, whether he was parked behind or in front of them, but he made sure that they couldn't really see. The only thing that they could see was that he was a black man, but he got the woman out of the car
mhm.
and kept the man in the car with some sort of ruse, but, like, you committed like, some really vague crime to get them out of the car and into his car so that he could assault them, and then was like, "Alright, cool, bye."
I see
So,
your I
I
see
think
your
it's
point.
possible. I think it's definitely possible, but, like, I've always been interested by the Zodiac because it's just like, what exactly is your purpose for this? Are you just doing this for fun? Do you hate couples? Are you
I
single?
see
Like, what?
I see your point. I do think I will say that people's understanding of the fight, flight, or freeze responses are sometimes very different or maybe inaccurate. I think more than not, people freeze when they're in a scenario of life or death, where it's like,
Mhm,
I don't want to make the wrong move to accidentally die, or I don't want to make the wrong move to get somebody else killed. I think literally in most of these situations, especially the fact that he is obviously targeting young people and children and teenagers, that these people are just freezing up. These kids are just freezing up. Because it seems
mhm,
as though like decisions aren't being made until after one of them does something. So obviously with the initial murder, it took the guy David to get murdered before she was like, "Whoa, he's dead. I gotta go now because I have nobody to protect me," or nothing. I'm the only
mhm,
one he's gonna focus on now. It's interesting. And I think to regards to the MO, him approaching couples is maybe oddly partially a power dynamic thing, because this goes into my theory of him being some sort of a college professor or school teacher. Because obviously from the depiction they gave and the depiction that you usually see in like the police art, he seems like he's a man of education to some extent. And I believe he's educated again to some extent just due to the fact that you created this 408 symbol cipher or cryptogram. That's something that I don't think the average person can do unless they have some form of education or at least an interest in these
mhm.
things.
Right,
So it seems like he has some form of education. So maybe he has some kind of a vendetta against young people from him being a teacher, from an event that happened, or maybe he just is tired of he's tired of these kids, which again, I kind of understand to an extent. Um,
right.
but yeah, that's my guess. My guess is that he's some kind of educator, or he has been, which is why he was able to do all the things he did. And again, it does make more sense when you're looking at the aspect of him being almost a narcissist to an extent, or somebody that needs attention. Because I'm looking at it, if somebody is doing a regular medial job, like being a school teacher, night in, night out, or day in, night out, day in, day out. Jesus Christ. Um, I could see where the escalation to him wanting to feel important or feel like somebody would what could come from him being a murderer. He's like, well, they're gonna remember me for something. I'm gonna leave a legacy on this world
Right.
before I go in some way or the other.
Agreed, agreed. I don't know, if they ever solve that, I would be so sad. Like, I would be sitting right there, ready, pen and paper. Who was it?
Nobody would take it seriously, and I feel like it's gonna be somebody random that nobody was thinking about. It's never
So
just
it's so random.
it's never somebody significant. It's always a random person that just had a mental break or mental lapse and just ended up on ended up on the wrong path.
Oh my god. That would be the day. That would be the day.
But what do you
Okay.
have for us, Dr. Knight?
Okay. So I have two killers and a murderer. I'm going to start with the least known one before I get into my absolute favorite serial killer in all of history. Um, so I'm going to start with the Axeman of New Orleans.
Mm.
Okay. So the Axeman of New Orleans was an unidentified serial killer in America, of course, and he was active in and around New Orleans between May of 1918 and October of 1919. So he just did a full year of killing some people and was just like, all right, cool, I'm dead. Time to go. Um, However, there were some that were saying that he had been killing since 1911, but they can't really pinpoint that. They're not 100% sure on any of that.
Mhm.
However, his thing was his victims, of course, were always attacked with an axe. It would be
Obviously.
very awkward if you were, calling yourself Axeman in Louisiana and using, you know what? I can't even say it because what's that movie? Axum
Axum,
on
yeah.
YouTube, and the movie is called Axum. He killed one person with an axe. After that, it was a gun, a bat, a telephone. I don't know. It's like, why are we here? But I digress. Okay, so the crimes though, like the murders, were not motivated by robbery. He never took anything. He just came in, chiseled like the back door of the house was always removed by a chisel, which takes a long ass fucking time.
Mhm.
So how you're not hearing your door being chiseled away is crazy to me
Boy, people
because he
sleeping
would
hard as hell
literally
back
have
then.
right. And so I'm just like, he had to have been doing it's not quiet. Chiseling is not a quiet thing. So it's like, where did y'all take drugs to go to sleep? But he always chiseled the back door away, and it was left, it was along the panel, and he attacked either with an axe or a straight razor, but it was 99% of the time it was an axe. And all of his victims, almost all of his victims were Italian immigrants or Italian Americans. So I
Mm.
said, "Damn, you're racist too? That's crazy."
Like, pick a problem, bro.
They always thought that it had something to do with the mafia. When this hit like media outlets, they always thought it had something to do with the mafia, but there was absolutely no evidence whatsoever. Some people also thought that he may have been a sexual sadist, but he never sexually assaulted anybody. And there was never like a sexual element. The only thing that they had to go off of was the fact that he killed female victims. He only killed the women and left the men. Like he maimed the men, but never killed them. He only killed the women.
So, racist, murderer, and misogynist. Got it. Check, check, check,
Right.
check.
However, there was also this theory that was going around where he only killed people who did not play jazz music in their
Oh
homes.
god. Oh god.
I said, "Okay, what?" So if they were like, "He's murdering people to promote jazz music." I guess that's one way of promoting jazz music. There was a letter sent to, the media where it was sent to a paper, and it was March 13, 1919, and it was addressed from hell to an esteemed mortal. And I'm like, "Okay, the dramatics are fucking insane." They have never caught me and they never will. They have never seen me, for I am invisible, even as the ether that surrounds your earth. I am not a human being, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest of hell. And I am what you Orleanians and your foolish police call the Axeman. And he says, "When I see fit, I shall come and claim other victims. I alone know who they shall be. I shall leave no clue except my bloody axe besmeared with the blood and brains of he whom I have sent below to keep me company."
He's
And
pretentious too. Oh my god.
basically basically the whole thing was him saying that exactly at exactly 12:15 earthly time on next Tuesday night, I'm going to pass over New Orleans as if he's God, cuz what? And in my infinite mercy, I'm going to make a little proposition to you people. I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing at the time I have just mentioned. If everyone has a jazz band going, well, then so much the better for you people. One thing is certain, and that is that some of you people do not know jazz.
Jesus.
And those who do not know jazz on that specific Tuesday night will get the axe. So everybody was somewhere in like the dance halls were filled to capacity and they played jazz music all fucking night long and nobody died that night. I said, "Well, I guess we're taking this shit seriously." So a couple of the victims, we have one who this one got very, very messy, very, very fast. It was Louis Bessumer and Harriet Lowe, and theirs was their attack was June 27, 1918. And Louis was married. Harriet was his mistress.
Mm.
They were getting busy at the back of the grocery store.
The grocery store?
The grocery store,
On the
and they fell asleep
mangoes?
in
Not the
front of my
mangoes.
eggs. But he was Bassumer was struck in the head with a hatchet above his right temple, which gave him a skull fracture. However, she was hacked over her left ear, and the left side of her face was permanently paralyzed.
Wow.
She didn't die from this attack because it was literally just like a hack slash thing. However, she did state that her lover is the one who attacked her.
Hmm?
And he ended up being arrested. It was super weird because they arrested a man named Louis Ubicon, who was a 41-year-old African American that had
Of
been
course.
employed there just before, like a week before the attacks. But there was no evidence that existed that could have proven him guilty, and they
Sounds about
arrested him
right.
anyway.
Sounds about right.
But then she had also said that the person who attacked her was a mulatto man. But they were like they chopped it up to her just being disoriented. Bitch, if I'm sitting here and giving you the description of the person who attacked me, why are you not listening?
Mulatto man is a crazy way to describe black people. That's crazy.
I mean, but it's 1918, so that's how they described people. And then it just became like a huge media circus. She was being called all every name in the book. They were attacking her and her character, and her lover ended up falling under suspicion of espionage because there were some foreign written letters in his possession. So she was like, "Oh, he was a German spy, I think. Also, he attacked me. So you should, do that."
Jeez. This is around the time of the World Wars. So okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he was arrested and let go and then arrested again, and he spent 9 months in prison before he was acquitted after the jury deliberated for like 10 minutes.
You know,
Right.
part of me part of me is kind of happy because I'm so surprised that they didn't just go on a Black Wall Street level black man manhunt in the area and just kill every
Mhm.
black man they saw. Because you telling me white people are getting murdered in their homes and hacked up, and you finally have somebody like you probably already assume it's a black man to start with back then at that point. But then
Mhm.
you tell me that this lady then said a black person did it. and you don't go just like murder every black person you see, I'm so surprised. At
So
very minimum, I'm
very
surprised like the Klan or anybody like that didn't go and like turn up.
very, very I was like, "Okay, so all right." Another victim was a woman named Erin or not Erin, but Anna Schneider. She was 28, 8 months pregnant, and she found when she was asleep, she woke up and found a dark figure standing over her who bashed her face in repeatedly, cut off her scalp, and then her face was just covered in blood. And her husband didn't find her until, like, midnight, and I'm like, "Where were you?" But he was at work. She was able to give birth to a baby girl, like, 2 days later. I think she did end up dying after that, though.
Jesus Christ.
Right. Another one was August 10th of 1918, Joseph Romano. Uh, him and his wife were actually, no. Joseph Romano was a suspect. Pauline and Mary Bruno were sleeping, and their elderly uncle was in his room, and he had taken a blow to the head, which had 2 open cuts. They were running, or the man who attacked him was running. They described him as a dark-skinned, heavy-set man who wore a suit and a hat. So you were walking into people's houses in a suit and a hat, hatching people. And he died 2 days later. Oh, no, he was a victim. I'm sorry. Joseph Romano. Yeah, he was a victim. Sorry. Yeah, he died 2 days later from severe head trauma. He had 2 gigantic axe cuts, in his head.
You know,
The next one was actually a family, though.
oh my God.
It was, um it was 2 people who died in that family. It was the wife, her name was Rosie Cortimiglia, and her infant daughter. And the infant daughter took a hit to the back of the neck.
The baby?
The baby.
I know I say fuck them kids, but literally is crazy.
And her mother, like, she was killed in her mother's arms. Charles and Rose, I think the baby was actually the victim because the mother ended up surviving a little late, like, surviving the attack, and sent her nephew and his 18-year-old son to jail. One of them was going to hang, and the son was going to hang, and the father got life in prison. Um, and she was like, "Oh, just kidding. I lied." And then she died. Like, okay, but I think it feels like the baby was the intended victim here because the baby took an axe swing to the neck, whereas the parents just got skull fractures.
This is another situation to where it's almost very similar to the Zodiac thing, to where I'm not sure how many kills or murders were actually at the hands of the original killer, and how many of these were people using this as a way to further their own nefarious or insidious deeds. 'Cause it seems like they were trying to find out like a legal way to get rid of that baby. Because I doubt if abortion's frowned upon today, I could only imagine it being a major thing back then, especially with a married couple.
Well, all of these are very, very similar. The guy coming into the house in the middle of the night, attacking the only female, or killing the female at present. So Anna, um, Harriet, Mary, the little baby.
Mhm.
I think it also said that Rosie got more of the attack than her husband. Charles only got 1 hit. Mary and Rosie had multiple, and then Mary got like axe to the neck. And then two the 2 or 3 singular men that were attacked, there was not a woman present.
Mm.
So it's like he really just does not like women. So we had like Steve Boca, Sarah Luaman, and Mike Pepitone. Um, Mike Pepitone, I think, was probably the most um violent of them because his blood was splattered everywhere in that house, including a painting of the Virgin Mary.
let me ask you this. How much of this well, first off, do you believe this is a black person that committed these axe murders?
You know what? I don't know because when they were giving when the two girls were giving the description after after their uncle had been murdered, they saw a dark skinned man and or they saw a dark skinned man running, but he's running in the dark. And I'm assuming they also do, at this time, I don't believe they have lights, like street lights.
Mhm.
So he's running around in the dark with no lights in a suit and a slouched hat and possibly gloves as well because there's no DNA that can be found anywhere. And it seemed more like and I can't really imagine this person being a black man, especially with the description given that was completely ignored of somebody who's light skinned.
Yeah, I feel like there's some kind of connection there, obviously, to black culture, more so for the fact of jazz being so influential
Mhm.
in these murderers. So it's like, okay, when I'm looking back at music at that point in time, I do know that there was a big thing around black music being something that was demonized when black people were performing it versus when somebody like Elvis or the
Mhm.
Beach Boys were performing it. So you're looking at somebody here who is being very adamant on the purity of the art form and why people should be playing it and why people don't know it and blah 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 blah. Blah. So it's either it's really tough for me to imagine it being a white man committing these murders because you have to find a white person at that standpoint who is not looking at jazz music as this evil thing, like jazz music, blues music as this evil thing for the most part. But it would be very interesting if it was though, because at that point again, you're looking at somebody who just happened to possibly not be racist, but maybe they are racist. I don't know. It was
But then you're
like
also looking at somebody who does not like Italians or Italian immigrants, which, they had black people working for them all the time, i.e., just, picking sinners working for, people in Chicago, right? And
what? Yeah.
then that's the mafia as well. But then you have, or like gangs and whatnot as well. But then you have like, not only does he not like this particular ethnic group of people, he does not like women.
So it could be this person's for sure American. I think it could be because keep in mind back then as well, the Irish and the Italians weren't really perceived as white people per se when they first immigrated here. They were
Mhm.
looked at in the same vein as the black people here until they
Right.
started taking up certain jobs like the fire department, the police department, and things like that, and started to integrate
Exactly.
themselves into, um, for lack of a better term, white privilege and all that other stuff. But if this because the misogyny I get, men hating women has been something since the beginning of time,
Of
I feel like
course.
damn near at this point, but the specifically hating the Italian people, it sounds like it's a white man in America. Because I can't imagine a black person specifically hating Italian people and mad at them for not loving or understanding the purity of jazz music. It sounds like
Mhm.
somebody who's very much so pretentious and narcissistic in their own right and felt like they just knew it all.
And you also have somebody educated in the way that they wrote that letter as well. And at that time in New Orleans, whether they wanted to admit it or not, if you did anything outside the norm as a black man, they're probably gonna hang you. You know what I'm saying? So it's
More than
like,
likely.
so them getting like being as educated as they were to write said letter and sounded like that, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like when Harriet had described somebody who was basically light skinned, they may have also been white passing.
Mm. Which
So
honestly could it
it
makes
may be that
sense.
too.
That makes sense. I think I can see the connection to the black culture aspect as well as some of the despise for the Italian people.
Mhm. Because now it's like I also kind of look like, because of course white people are, I mean, Italian people are white passing. So it's like this person is up close, you are able to definitely tell that they are of African American descent, but then like far away they're white passing. Like if you see them just kind of like at a glance. And it's like, is it that anger because now you're being in that same stint of the Italians if you're just white passing?
Right, 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 right.
So I don't know. It could be, honestly.
It's interesting.
It could be.
It's
Now.
interesting. Oh god.
Okay, so the next one I have is my favorite serial killer of all time. Okay.
Lay it on me.
It is Jack the Ripper. Late 1800s.
Classic. Classic, classic, classic.
Super classic. Okay. Now, I do know I saw in the news where they were like, "Oh, we identified Jack the Ripper, blah blah blah," and it's literally the same person that they said probably about 4 or 5 years ago, which they literally debunked the same exact 4 or 5 years ago. So I'm just like, y'all ain't stopping nothing. Um, they can't seem to decide, and they just keep going back and forth. So it's just like, leave it to y'all haven't solved it. It's fine. So for those of you who, weirdly enough, do not know who Jack the Ripper is, he was a serial killer who was active in the Whitechapel district of London, England in 1888. He killed 5 women.
Damn, only
Okay.
5?
Um, The canonical 5 is what they're calling it, but he may have killed more, but they are having a hard time linking the other murders because there came out to be 11, but they're having a hard time linking the other murders to Jack the Ripper specifically because Jack the Ripper was so specific. Like, one of the murders they found was just a torso.
Damn.
Right. So
He was
they're
getting
having a
busy.
really hard time linking the other 6, but they do have the canonical 5, and the canonical 5 are Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. And I am going to do Mary Jane Kelly last because hers is like the most interesting to me.
Mhm.
So all of the murders took place between because they're saying 11 murders, but I'm going to just deal with the canonical 5. So it's stretching from April 3rd of 1888 to February 13th of 1891.
Okay,
So
okay,
we have
okay.
3 years of this. um And it was several things. There was, like, a woman who was robbed and sexually assaulted, April 3rd, and she was bludgeoned in the face and received a cut on her ear, and she was assaulted with, a blunt object. After that, there was, someone who got stabbed 39 times. Um,
39.
yes, and she was murdered on
Oh
a staircase.
oh my god.
Um and that was in August of 1888. And they think it was a penknife by somebody who was right-handed. Um, and then there was, of course, a torso that had been found way later. So there was like a bunch of things going on. But for the canonical 5, Mary Ann Nichols was the first one. Hers was her body was discovered at 3:40 a.m. on August 31st in 1888 in Whitechapel. And she had been seen alive an hour before her body was discovered, which is very interesting. She had 2 deep cuts on her throat, ear to ear. And the cuts were so deep, one of them actually severed all of the tissue down to her vertebrae. Her private parts had been stabbed twice, and then the lower part of her abdomen had been partially ripped open by a deep, jagged cut, and her bowels had come out.
Oh my god.
And then she also had several incisions on both sides of her abdomen that had been caused by the same knife. And they were in like a downward thrusting manner as if they were trying to get something out of her. Um, a week later, in September, Annie Chapman was discovered at 6 a.m. near the steps of a to the doorway of a backyard. and her throat had also had two deep cuts. Her abdomen had been entirely cut open. Um, a section of her flesh from her stomach had been placed on her left shoulder, and another section, plus her small intestines, had been removed and placed above her right shoulder. And um, her uterus and sections of her bladder had been removed. I need that these are very important details for what I'm going to say, later after this.
Okay.
Um, and they said that they had seen her alive at 5:30. Mind you, her body was discovered at 6, so we have 30 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. And then we have Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, who were both killed on Sunday, September 30th. And Stride's body was found at 1 a.m. Um, she had a clear-cut incision across the neck from ear to ear that severed her carotid artery and her trachea. Um, and they also cut into her jaw.
Jesus Christ.
Right. And then they were trying to, because she didn't have any, like, cuts to her abdomen, they're trying to determine if she was a intended victim or if she walked in on a murder in progress. Because about 45 minutes later, they found Catherine Eddowes' body, like, across town. Her throat had also been severed ear to ear. Her abdomen had been ripped open. And her uterus had also been removed, as well as her kidney. Her face had been disfigured, her nose was severed, cheeks slashed. So she was definitely the intended victim. It's just a question of if Elizabeth was also an intended victim, because she may have just kind of walked in on that whole situation. Um, and they said that they saw uh Catherine with a man earlier that day, but that same man was seen later on. Like, but at the time that that same man was seen later on, Catherine was still alive, so it wasn't him. Um, and she also had like an apron, so she was found like, so all of this was about 2:55 a.m. for Catherine. Now, Mary Jane Kelly, which is our last of the canonical five, was disemboweled and extensively mutilated. She was discovered lying in her bed in a single room where she lived at 10:45 a.m. On Friday, November 9th in 1888. Her face had been hacked beyond all recognition, her throat severed down to the spine,
Okay.
and her abdomen almost completely emptied of all of its organs. Her uterus had been removed, and so did her one of her kidneys, and one of her breasts had been placed beneath her head. And there was another, just several organs were placed at the bottom of her feet, and her heart was missing. Now, and they of course have all kinds of different other murders that happened after that. There was a strangled body of a woman named Rose, um, in December of 1888. There was no signs of struggle, so they think that she either accidentally hung herself while she was drunk, or she just committed suicide. Um, but they did find that there was something going on with her neck, and they saw that she had been strangled. But while they said that she was murdered, they don't know if it's connected to Jack the Ripper. Another person named Alice McKenzie was murdered July 17th in 1989 in Castle Alley. Stab wounds to her neck. Her carotid artery had been severed. She had bruises and cuts all over her body. from her breast to her navel, where she had been cut open. They think this one was, but they also kind of disagree
Lord.
because of the way that her throat had been cut. It was significantly different. Although the carotid artery had been, or yeah, the carotid artery had been severed, there were that kind of distinctions in the knife that was used, as well as the fact that it wasn't two slashes and it wasn't nearly as deep as the other victims. And then just kind of how the cut from the breast to the navel was done, the rest of them was done straight across the stomach versus coming from the chest down.
Let's go ahead and get into it. It seems like Jack the Ripper has some form of hatred towards women to some extent.
But the thing is, each of these women that was murdered were prostitutes.
I mean,
So he has a hatred for prostitutes.
I think that's more so a product of convenience than it is them being prostitutes, in my opinion. Just because I'm looking at like what women are gonna be by themselves in dark alleys at that period of time in that era, if you're not a prostitute or you're not working at a brothel. Because you already
Yeah.
like damn
So
near can't
the
even
thing
live
is,
on without a man, let alone like
right.
be out and about with one.
So my thing is, um, I have always thought that Jack the Ripper was a woman.
Really? Why is that?
Yes. So at that time, and just because they are saying that Jack the Ripper had a lot of medical training because of the cuts, how they cut the arteries, how they sliced the throat, how they were able to remove the organs and everything like that. And they knew exactly where the uterus was to remove them. And then it was the removal of the uterus all the time. Every victim had her uterus removed. So I have a woman who despises prostitutes, and this is just, of course, me working. She despises prostitutes because her husband cheated on her with a prostitute, and she was never able to get pregnant.
Hmm.
And then you have this person who also has medical attention or medical training because she is one of those in-house nurses. So
Uh-huh.
whenever you can't afford to go to an actual hospital as a prostitute, you call one of those private in-house nurses who make house calls. And people were like, "Oh, well, I saw her alive an hour ago. I saw her alive 30 minutes ago." You have somebody who's able to work fast with their hands and come in where that victim is not going to scream because you're supposed to be in their house. Now, if a man just busts up in there, because a lot of these women were killed near apartments, like apartment buildings. So there are people who are there who would have heard the screaming. So, but I'm not hearing any screaming because I know I called this person for medical attention because I am a prostitute. I can't afford actual, fucking healthcare. I can't go to the doctor. So I can get you to come in, right? And we have somebody who comes in and they pull out the knife that they're going to use to murder this person, but I'm not going to scream because you are a doctor that I called to my house.
See, that makes a lot of sense. I think the strength factor there is gonna be insane. This woman has to be strong as hell. One, to have the stamina to stab somebody 39 times consecutively. Two, to rip uteruses out. And again, I think the hypothesis to her being some kind of healthcare provider does really get benefited by the aspect of her removing a uterus. 'Cause I don't even know if the normal person knows what a uterus looks like. I know as hell I don't know what a uterus looks like.
I mean, and you don't even have to actually rip it out. A lot of them were just cut out. So they have this uterus cut out. So you would have to not only know what it looks like, know where it is, but you have to know how to cut it out. So they have this cut out, and it's very much anger towards these specific women. Like the last victim, they saw someone leaving her apartment in a dress, and they're like, "Oh,
Mm,
I saw someone leaving in a dress." Well, if I'm somebody who is in the medical profession and I'm serving prostitutes, if I'm leaving with a bloodied apron, you're not going to question me because I'm a medical professional.
true, 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 true. It does allow her to blend in a lot easier.
Yeah, and then of course there was letters written to the media about, "Oh, I'm Jack the Ripper, I'm the one who killed them," but of course they were just like, "These are hoax letters," and then there were some people who said that, they wrote the letters to heighten the story, for the media. So nobody can really place if the letters were real or not and things like that.
That is insane. That is a hell of a
But I
story.
always said that she did have a partner because it does take a lot to carry a dead weight body to these different locations. So I'm gonna say she had a man as a partner, but as for the actual murdering, she did the murdering herself.
It's giving me like a inverse Sweeney Todd type of vibe there, where it's a duo and
Mhm.
yeah, the man's doing a lot of the grunt work while she's murdering the people.
Yes, and it's like she has this hatred for these women in particular, and it shows in the actual murder. Now, whether the other murders are attributed to Jack the Ripper, nobody really knows because the methods are so different. But these canonical 5, she hated y'all. I'm sorry. Y'all did something. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I can't get over 39 times. Getting like I know how
Same.
tired I'd be in the kitchen, like cutting a potato or cutting 10 potatoes or like chopping up meat and shit like that, like stabbing somebody with a not even like a kitchen knife. They said it's like a pen knife. This is a small knife, and you're stabbing somebody 39
Mhm.
times
But
until
then
they die.
imagine, like, the very last victim, she was the one who was the most damaged. So, like, she was the most mutilated out of all of them. So that one is pure personal hatred.
Yeah, she does not fuck with these people at all. These women, these sex
Mm-mm.
workers, yeah, she's like, not fuck them.
And then, of course, before we end, just a murder that happened back in the, like, 1940s in LA was a woman named Elizabeth Short. She's known as the Black Dahlia. She was brutally murdered in her home, and they have never been able to solve this case. They've had 150 suspects and no arrests.
150 suspects?
150 suspects and no arrests.
Do they describe what the somebody had some kind of a description, right? Or a reason to
Nope.
have that many people be like suspected?
Nope. They were pulling, like, they were doing like a lot of extensive investigation, and through their extensive investigation, they pulled 150 people. Um they never really had anything. There was no fingerprints, no nothing. So while they were, asking people um what she may have been doing, at one point she was with a man named Robert Manley, who was a salesman that was also married at the time. But he had dropped her off at the hotel, the Biltmore Hotel in downtown LA. She was supposed to meet one of her sisters who was visiting from Boston, and she left the hotel. Um, and she was seen later on, but then she was found January 15th, in 1947, naked, severed into pieces.
That's insane. Pieces. That's a crazy murder. That's a crazy murder. That's an
Pieces.
even crazier investigation. Like I think the more we talk about deaths or murders or serial killers, like in the prior to the 1970s, the least faith I had the lower amount of faith I have for any form of like police department back then or like FBI because it seems like you just could
Mhm.
not find out who did things without the modern day forensics or behavioral analysis or things of that nature.
Right, and her body was, because they separated her from her top half, so they had her top half and her bottom half, and then her top half had been just, like, sliced away, and then her intestines were a foot away, and they were like, tucked under her butt, which was over, like, a foot away from her. And then her body had been posed with her hands over her head, her arms bent at right angles, and her legs spread apart.
So you damn near oh my god, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Crucified her, damn near.
Yes.
Yeah.
Someone did make a phone call to the killer did make a phone call to the police office. Actually not the police office, but they made a call to the editor of the Examiner congratulating him on his newspaper coverage of the case, stating that he planned on eventually turning himself in, but not before allowing the police to pursue him further. And then he said, expect some souvenirs from Beth Short in the mail.
I feel like that's more of people looking for attention. I don't know if that was the I don't know. Some of the
Well,
stuff, I don't know if
well,
it's actually killer or not.
he did get 3 days later, he did get a manila envelope, and it was her birth certificate, business cards, photographs, names written on paper, her address book, um, and the packet had been cleaned with gasoline, which is what he also used to clean her body. So, you know.
This is crazy. This is insane. Absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. Absolutely insane.
It's
I
this is insane time.
yeah. Again,
But, of course, she's been the inspiration for several things. There were rumors, of course, there was movies that, happened after that. They have, it was like around the time after her murder, they were introducing the bill for the sex offender registry,
mm,
um, and it's never been solved.
I think one of those two that probably will never be solved at this point. If you had 150
Probably never.
suspects, and yeah, 150 suspects back then, you couldn't figure it out. There's probably no DNA or anything like that you could really look at. Yeah, it's just cooked. That's one of those
And there
where
is a
you.
Black Dahlia movie that you guys can watch also. Came out in
Uh,
2006.
yeah, I was going to ask you about that too.
Mhm.
Well, you got anything else you want to cover before we get up out of here?
No, that was a lot of death today.
Yeah, I need to go watch some SpongeBob or something and take a nap and get this out of my brain. Jesus.
Well, that is it, for today. Thank you guys for tuning in with us. Continue to tune in with us. Did you have anything to say?
No, man. Just be on the lookout for each of the new episodes that are coming out week by week, y'all. Thank y'all so much for watching and supporting us up until this point, and we hope for your continued support going forward.
All right, and this has been Ghastly Gospels, sinister stories, no salvation required.
Mm.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.